How do you do? The Box Office Pulp Board feels it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We're about to unfold a cinematic commentary track, made by a group of men who sought to create a podcast after their own ravings, without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with three great mysteries of the internet: analysis, observation, and deconstruction. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel you'd not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we've warned you. Now, to pause and refresh. For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby, with buttered popcorn, golden good and hot from the popper, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich, plus delicious Dr. Pepper, so bright and bracing with a tang and tingle unmatched by any other beverage. Enjoy an ice-cold Dr. Pepper at our beverage stand right now, and then return to fully appreciate this bop and a movie commentary track. Enjoy.
This is it. This is the answer. It says here that a bolt of lightning is going to strike the clock tower at precisely 10:04 p.m. next Saturday night. If we could somehow harness this lightning, channel it into the flux capacitor, it just might work. Next Saturday night, we're sending you back to the future.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Box Office Pulp, your one-stop podcast for movies, madness, moxie, and tonight. Memories that no longer make sense because you've traveled into the past and altered your family's personal timeline, erasing the people you all once were. That's right. Tonight, we're doing a bop in a movie commentary for the quintessential time travel movie, Back to the Future. I'm your host, Cody, and serving as my own personal stash of plutonium are my co-host, Mike. Say hello, Mike.
I don't believe Michael J. Fox came out of Crispin Glover's balls.
That's a fair complaint. And my other co-host, Jamie. Say hello, Jamie.
I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I am actually the product of my father traveling back in time and having sex with his mother. So this movie was pretty rough to go through.
I'm already confused about this timeline. Could you please diagram it with a bunch of straws, possibly? And a Bruce Willis impression. That's my one Looper joke for the night. Thank you.
Hey, that is my
You're
favorite anyone describing time travel scene, though.
Good. Anyways, enough shenanigans. We've got ourselves a classic movie here. So, folks at home, if you want to join us for this commentary series, you know the drill, but let's go through the steps. We're going to watch the movie. You have the option to watch the movie. If you want to watch along with us, we're going to have a countdown. When that countdown ends, we're going to play the movie and then talk over it. You can listen to us solo. You can listen to us with the movie. It's your life. You do you. I think they've got it all, Mike. You want to count us down?
Your drink?
Ah, shit. This is already off the rails. Tonight, folks.
If only you could go back in time to the beginning of the episode.
And then murder me for that screw-up and then replace me as a better me. We are drinking tonight, folks, Blue Hawaiians. So what you're going to need is 3/4 of an ounce light rum, 3/4 of an ounce vodka. I'm a Tito's man myself, but you do your thing. 1 ounce Blue Curaçao, 2 ounces pineapple juice, 1/4 ounce simple syrup, 1/4 ounce lemon juice, 1/4 ounce lime juice, a pineapple wedge, and a couple of cherries. So, except for those last couple of fruits, you're going to take all the ingredients, drop them into a shaker, fill that shaker with ice, give it about 20 swirls, drain that into a hurricane glass filled with more ice, and then garnish it with your pineapple wedge and a cherry. Boom, you got yourself a Blue Hawaiian. It has a distinct blue mad science-y kind of hue to it. It would look bitchin' in a tiki mug. Hurricane glass is the suggested one, but, be a rebel. Anyways, the Blue Hawaiian was originally invented by bartender Harry Yee in 1957, beating out the Elvis film by 4 years and actually taking its name from a Bing Crosby song, which was featured in the movie Waikiki Wedding in 1937. For Back to the Future, I felt like, You had to get a 50s cocktail, so check one. And I naturally gravitated towards rum-based tiki drinks because there's just something about the idealized kitsch that's associated with that, you know, kind of perfect imaginary fake tropical vacation dropped into the Midwest suburb feel you get with a tiki drink. And that kind of reminds me of Marty's situation. Also, it's real pretty to look at, and it tastes fine too. So there's your drink for the evening. If you want to also make a drink, you can pause this commentary now. Make this delicious, I haven't tried it yet, this probably delicious thing, and then come back.
Let's all find out together, folks. No.
I made it double, so I'm really hoping it's good because it overflowed my glass, and I had to pour another into a shot glass.
Goody.
It is primarily booze. I mean, there's 4 ounces of pineapple juice in here. It's all right.
I'm impressed. I just thought you were going to go with a rum and coke as a reference to the original version of the movie.
Ooh, that is smooth.
I'm glad
That's
it
good
worked
stuff.
out.
It's I prefer a little more fruit-heavy flavor there, but it does a good job keeping the rum and vodka kind of mellow. Mike, you ready to count us down?
I am really just happy that I was able to remind you of the drink you had in front of you at the time.
Technically 2 drinks I had in front of me because it had the overflow glass.
That you just made, not a scant 10 minutes ago.
Fresh. Oh, I almost forgot to mention as well, if you want to get real fancy with this guy, the ice you threw in the hurricane glass, throw that into a blender, throw your drink into the blender, pulse that for a couple seconds, pour it back out. Now it's more like, a nice icy smoothie. Super tropical.
And that is what makes time travel possible.
Plutonium, the best drink.
Anyway, I'm going to count to 3. After I say 3, we're going to press play. Hope you folks at home are ready. 1, 2, 3. Fun fact, I briefly thought about counting it backwards, but I thought I would be a dick for doing that after all of these commentaries.
Now I'm disappointed. Can we scrap this and start over?
Let's just scrap this whole idea.
This show is done. We're no longer making box office pulp.
I like the idea of Back to the Future being where you show your true colors.
Oh.
And guys, we immediately open with history because this was the first Steven Spielberg Presents, wasn't it? At least our first appearance of super producer Spielberg.
This was the first
around that time.
This was the first non-Spielberg Amblin movie, wasn't it? I believe so.
Stop asking me questions I don't know.
To talk about why we're doing Back to the Future real quick. I'm sorry, you were about to say something?
I wanted to talk about the intricacies of this shot because it never occurred to me what a pain in the ass this must have been until watching the special features on the disc. Hey, it's safety last. Just think about this, folks, looking at all this stuff. All of these clocks are set to the exact same time. Big deal. You set them one at a time, you get them all to sync, whatever. The problem is they all have to say a specific time for the shot. So you either have to set them and then film at that time, or you have to set them earlier and make sure they're all set by the time you're about to sit down and film the scene. Because if one's wrong, then they all got to be reset. And if you screw up the shot, then you have to reset 27 different clocks and get them all right for the shot again, which I don't even want to think about dealing with. That sounds god-awful. And as we go through the shot, there's not even cutting. This is all a really great oneer. They have a Rube Goldberg thing going on with some of these devices. In a couple seconds, we're going to see dog food come out of a can. Apparently, the dog food can change because they couldn't get permission for the original one they wanted to use. So they had to have a torch off camera heating up the dog food so it would plop out of the can appropriately. Just on a technical level, this shot is amazing. And it's great because I never realized what a pain in the ass this was until I was specifically told.
Same.
It is hell. And from a technical standpoint, this is a fucking miracle scene. And from a storytelling standpoint, it's a miracle scene. The entire movie is in this oneer. This opening scene tells you everything, up to and including one of the first clocks you see is a reference to an old Harry Lloyd movie. It's a dude hanging off the clock, which sets up Doc Brown hanging off the clock tower at the end. Also,
safety last.
Also, it's an in-joke because Harry Lloyd, Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah, I never noticed that dude until rewatching this in preparation. There's a lot of little details I have not noticed, despite this being one of my favorite movies for most of my life.
That's what excites me about doing Back to the Future. We thought this would be a good companion piece to Spielberg Month for us to go through the Back to the Future films and provide some commentaries for them. Because I think Back to the Future is up there with with that movie series, and it's considered like one of the greatest movie series of all time. But I think the expertise of them is taken for granted a lot because it's so ubiquitous. It's so ubiquitous even just with quality. When you actually stop to both delve into like the behind the scenes stories of how it was put together, it's incredible, and it's a fucking film school class essentially. But also when you just start breaking down everything that built this, particularly this first film, you can learn everything you need to know about like storytelling just from this film in such an incredible way.
Oh yeah, I feel like no exaggeration, listening to Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis talk about this franchise over the past 2 weeks has made me a better writer.
Same.
So one thing I wanted to comment on, we've already kind of missed it, but I love the way that Marty's introduced. We see his feet walk into frame, we hear him call for Doc. Even when he's kind of turning on the amp, we get close-up shots of his hands, his back. Here he's wearing the glasses when he gets kicked back. We don't get a proper shot of him until now. And it feels like a big build-up for this character, which makes sense now because we know Marty McFly is an iconic staple of cinema. But would he be that if he wasn't introduced and treated as if he is that iconic member of cinema? In my mind, it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. They have to walk the walk before people believe them. But, what if they do that and no one believed it? It would be terrible. We'd just think, oh, God, this is so hammy.
Yeah, I feel like that's the reaction they probably would have gotten if they continued with Eric Stoltz in the role.
Yeah.
So you can't film anyone else like you film Michael J. Fox specifically in this role. Like, could you imagine a nobody as Marty McFly being filmed by Dean Cundey that way? I don't think that would pop at all.
No. And to go back a little further, Mike, to one of the points you brought up about how people kind of dismissed the craft in this movie, I've always felt that this movie gets a little overlooked because everyone knows about it. It's on TV constantly. It's always been around. Everyone knows everything about Back to the Future, it feels like. And when something's common, we tend to look past it.
Yeah.
Citizen Kane isn't on TV all the time, and I think that makes us stop and appreciate the craft more when you put on the DVD. And there's almost a snobbishness to it. Hey, this is a popular movie. How well done can it be?
Now, it's kind of the tragedy of the movies we hold like the closest to our heart, is that we don't view them as things made by people. They just feel like things that fell out of the sky, ready-made and perfect. That was the fascinating thing in going back and looking at previous drafts of the script in preparation.
Like when Marty was a serial killer who went through time murdering until Jack the Ripper got him?
Oh yeah,
it was dark.
It was just the Shining girls. It was awesome. But you're really not far off. Like, you read the first draft, and like all first drafts, it's just two writers going, this thing happens, and then this thing happens, and maybe this idea. But it's for one of the most iconic movies ever made. So like, seeing the bullshit phase, like the bullshitting phase of that, like really does make you appreciate, wow, everything had to be workshopped to perfection for any of this to work.
And during the special features, they do a really rudimentary thing for breaking the story. That's so obvious you kind of kick yourself for not realizing, oh, that's how stories should be written. They mention they write out a cue card saying, what do we want to say in this movie? All right, we want Marty to invent rock and roll. That's a funny joke. So if you have that card out there, well, then you need another card to explain that Marty can play rock and roll. So we have to establish that story beat. So you get the story just by breaking it down to its simplest blocks like that. Just one statement on a note card, and then build off of that. What are the implications of that card you just plopped down? And by the time you're done, you should have a full story told through note cards. It's simple as hell, but hey, that's how you get a good, solid structure.
Yeah, and it creates something that's genius about Back to the Future, where if you're used to watching it, so a movie almost exists as osmosis to you. And it seems like it's very very airy, like it's a lot of just hanging out, and yeah, there's a plot, but it's like, oh, the plot's just sort of there. Because you kind of stop appreciating all of the actual work that's going into the machinations of the plot and the film, where you realize, oh, literally not a second of this movie is wasted. Everything is set up and payoff, set up and payoff, set up and payoff, constantly. Every single scene, there's lines, the little tiny bits that's either a setup and a payoff for just, a throwaway joke, or a larger scene, or something that's even
Zemeckis and
happened
Gale
later.
are the most hardcore believers in Chekhov's gun out there.
Yeah. Look at the almost literal Chekhov's gun and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
And all this stuff, like Goldie for mayor. Well, we'll see that paid off and set up. There's so many different things. When Marty sees the truck in a second, same deal. That'll pay off. Everything that's going on, him playing the guitar music and being told by Huey Lewis that he's too loud, it's all going to pay off and be important.
And what's even greater to me is, I don't think we're going to talk like a ton about the sequels because we're going to be getting there for commentaries, but I love how, because it's Zemeckis and Gale, they took just every single little throwaway line in here and built a trilogy out of it.
Yeah.
Because it always has to come from somewhere. Like, nothing about this movie or the entire trilogy is pulled out of air. Like, it's all from something within the film, within the construction and the bones.
Case in point, look at Marty gazing longingly at the truck that will one day ruin his life.
Someday.
And we'll land him in Hilldale in the future when it's a shithole. The amount of reverse engineered symmetry has always blown my mind with this movie.
Before we get too far along here, I got to do my Back to the Future facts. Hey! Directed by Robert Zemeckis. Screenplay by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Your main cast, you've got Michael J. Fox, you've got Christopher Lloyd, Lee Thompson, Crispin Glover, Tom Wilson. Music by Alan Silvestri. Cinematography by our old buddy Dean Cundy. If we made a swear jar but replaced swearing with Cundy, we'd be rich. We could all afford really good mics. Every movie we do is Cundy.
To be fair, Cundy does sound like some kind of old-timey slur, so...
Can we make Cundy into our official slur for Box Office Pulp?
I'm one Cundy hair away from turning the show off. Editing. We had to have a two-man crew because this movie had to be rushed out in time for the 4th of July holiday. And those editors were Arthur Schmidt and Harry Karamitis. Released July 3rd, 1985, budgeted at $19 million, and that included pretty much reshooting half the film after they brought in Michael J. Fox to replace the original Marty. I think they said it was like $3 million to refilm his scenes. Anyways, grand total box office, $389 million worldwide. $210 million of that was domestic dollars. Just for a quick fun comparison, this blew my mind earlier. A Nightmare on Elm Street came out. A Nightmare on Elm Street came out like 6 months before this movie did, and it made $25 million domestic box office, and that was phenomenal success. That was people freaked out about that. They still refer to New Line Cinema as the house Freddy built. That was $25 million. This one in America alone made $210 million 6 months later. That's how big this movie was. It was the highest grossing film of 1985. And to even compare that, because everyone loves hearing about money, if you look at 1985, the second highest grossing film domestically was Rambo First Blood Part 2. That made $150 million. This made $210 million. That's the 1 and 2. And then 3 was Rocky IV, The Color Purple, Out of Africa, Cocoon, Jewel of the Nile, Witness, The Goonies, Spies Like Us. God damn, Back to the Future made bank. It's insane how much money that was. In 1985, $210 million is just an astronomical amount. I don't know what it is adjusted for inflation, but it has to be just astounding. Also, if anyone's curious about numbers, because this is the only thing I ever want to do with my life is just look up box office information, 1984 was fucking bananas. Beverly Hills Cop was the number one movie of 1984. That one made $234 million. That's right, Beverly Hills Cop actually outgrossed a year before Back to the Future in America. As did Ghostbusters, the number 2 movie of the year. 1984 was stacked, is what I'm trying to say.
And God, could you imagine a high concept, high budget comedy that does not have a superhero in it, like making that kind of serious bank like in the modern movie scene? It really makes you think about just how much movies have changed since then.
Well, that's the thing. A movie comes out now and goes, oh, it made $100 million. That's pretty good. But you just kind of shrug at it. Like $100 million isn't impressive. But, 30 years ago, oh my God, that movie made $100 million? Dear God, you have to make 13 sequels right now.
That movie made back its budget?
Well, we're living in an age now where films cost $200 million, and then marketing is probably another $200 million, and there's back-end deals and everything else. It can be tough to make money now. You got to be a worldwide enterprise for it to work out. Times is different. It's actually one of my favorite parts about this film and watching it right now. Back to the Future, made 1985. Marty goes back 30 years into the past. We're not quite 30 years into the future. We're a little bit more than that. But, close enough. We're at the point now where we're equidistant from the movie and the place that it took into the past. And I kind of like that idea because we can look back at Marty's age and feel as alien as he felt when he went to the 50s.
Oh yeah, that's all I could think of whenever I was rewatching this. It's like, look at how weird Marty looks with that jacket. That does look like a life preserver.
The 50s
What is
was
his
right.
deal?
Everything's a cycle. Another thing that's kind of fascinating to me here is if this had been made by someone like Disney, because they shop this movie around. Disney was one of the groups interested in possibly making it, but they said it was, outside of what they would do. It's a little too dark. And boy, just imagine if this was made nowadays for a major studio. How many of these elements do you think would get through in the same way? Do you think Marty's mom would be pretty much an alcoholic?
I feel like this movie would have been made, but it would have been like an R-rated sex comedy.
They could have gone for that, or I think they would have toned down some of the more risque elements. Not that this movie is Meatballs, but there's stuff here that's a little bit edgier.
It would have had a lot, I think, of
more 4-quadrant.
Yeah, a lot of what makes Back to the Future, I think, would have been removed. Like, just the little bits. Like you even bring up the alcoholism thing. Like, it's not really a big part of the film at all. It's just a very subtle thing in this one scene. That wouldn't have been in there. But it oddly...
And
it
used
kind
for
of
a joke.
adds
Alcoholism used
something.
as a joke, I think. You can use it for dramatic purposes. Like, a character's smoking a cigarette. He's going to learn to quit that in the proper future. I guess we get the same thing here with the alcoholism, but this isn't a dramatic learning lesson. It's just, isn't it funny? She's out of shape and drinking booze and, their uncle's in jail.
But they still kind of use it for a subtle moment later when he tells young Lorraine to, you don't want to form a habit. Like, you can tell there's, thoughts on it Marty has. And it's like as in-depth as they get on it.
To take a moment, Crispin Glover.
Look at
Crispin Hellion Glover.
One, he's a double-edged sword. Because, boy, what a weirdo. But, man, that's what the role requires. If George McFly was just boring, who cares? Yeah, your dad's boring. Dads are sometimes boring.
Yeah.
This dad is like a boring fucking lame-o weirdo. It's perfect. And that laugh, it's like, oh no, I married Fran Drescher.
Oh yeah, seeing the difference between George on the page and George as performed by Crispin Glover is night and day. especially in the earlier drafts where he's not even really a wimpy nerd. He's just a boring 50s dude. And the story is more about trying to make him a cool guy rather than him fighting for himself. But with that performance, like, they don't have to tell you a single thing about George McFly. The second you get to that laugh, you know exactly who George McFly is. They've done all the exposition.
That's really it. It's economy and storytelling. Just if your actor's good enough, you don't have to tell us, they'll show you. Okay, wait. Here now. Another moment of iconic filmmaking. We're seeing the DeLorean, the time machine. And it gets Einstein turning his head. The slow, dramatic reveal, the mystery bells from Silvestri, the smoke, followed by these kind of triumphant stingers. They sell the hell out of you thinking this is a cool scene. And it works, because all these years later, 30 plus years later, we look at the DeLorean and we go, wow, that's an iconic piece of cinema history. Now imagine if they cut the scene and the DeLorean just rolled out and they just kind of shrugged. Would we think of the DeLorean the same way? I kind of feel like unless they sell us on how iconic this is, we won't believe it's iconic.
I think that's really just Zemeckis' style in general. I feel he's kind of like the Alex Ross of directors. Like, he can't not make everything feel like the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of, you guys have seen Dr. No, right? The first James Bond movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even in that one, when they introduce James Bond, he does the Bond, James Bond, and like the camera kind of stops, and it almost feels like someone has just scratched a record and the room's gone silent. Just imagine if James Bond was introduced like, who's this? Hello, Bond. And they moved on.
Oh, you mean his first introduction in that TV special from the 50s? Where he's
Don't
Jimmy
talk
Bond?
about Casino Royale.
Just some dude as James Bond. American James Bond.
Anyways, the larger point I'm trying to reach here is, I think in filmmaking, people kind of roll their eyes when people go big in film, and you do these showstopper moments where you're introducing a character or an idea. But that's what we remember. That's what your mind holds on to, and you think, wow, that was something, wasn't it? And if you don't do that, it just doesn't hold. Like you were saying about Zemeckis, he has a great propensity for that, and that's why there are so many memorable parts to the Back to the Future franchise. Get showy, goddammit, Hollywood.
And you can feel when a movie is taking itself seriously, even in maybe kind of a silly way or a fun way. It's like, oh, it's selling you on this. Like it's got something to at least try to say about whatever it's showing you that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment, but it has conviction on how it's showing it. So,
well, it has that same magic tone that Ghostbusters has, where you're watching a comedy that is dead serious to everyone inside of that universe.
yeah.
Like, there aren't really jokes. It's just a ridiculous circumstance that you can laugh at. Like, you could remove the more humorous elements and just do this as a straight story.
Oh yeah, it's just a straight sci-fi movie. I was saying that to you the other night, Jamie, that this and Ghostbusters are like in the exact same camp. Like, they're intertwined in my head. It's like, this is what like a great comedy is to me, and it's because like I miss studio comedies like this. There's no, like you said, there's no jokes in the movie. It happens to be funny, and it's constructed and designed with it being funny secondary to it being a movie, which is what works so well about it.
To me, the funniest part of the film really is the dynamic between Marty and Doc Brown. It's brilliant because they're both not doing jokes, but they're not doing straight man. They're doing like a perversion of straight man where Marty reacts off of Doc. But he's not the straight man. He's exaggerating his responses. And a DeLorean? You know, he has a comedy spin on his reactions. And Doc Brown is so animated, he's the comedy character. So instead of doing one where a guy lobs the ball up and the other guy smacks it out of the park, you have both of these guys throwing the balls at themselves somehow, or to each other, I suppose, and smacking them out of the park. It's a two-hander, and it's brilliant. You have two different approaches to the comedy, and both of them have their strengths they're working on. With Marty, it's kind of the everyman crazed reaction of, what the hell is this? And Doc Brown is the bigger-than-life wacky character. I love it. You don't get a lot of movies that can manage that well. Or even want to take that risk where both characters are trying to get laughs. On top of that, one of my favorite parts of the documentary is them mentioning when they showed this to a test audience, they weren't told what this movie was. They didn't know what Back to the Future was. They were told it was a time travel. I don't even know if they're told it was.
No, they weren't told anything.
Nothing.
Nope.
So they get in, and the audience didn't know it was a comedy. And at this point, they hadn't attuned to the fact that you're really supposed to laugh. And they saw a dog had just disappeared, and the audience was concerned this was going to be like a scary sci-fi film or like something bad had happened to the dog. And once they find out the dog is okay, then they realize, oh, we can laugh. This is a funny movie.
Well, it didn't occur to me until rewatching it for this episode. Like, for the first time in many, many years, Doc Brown is kind of terrifying before you meet him.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
Why is he doing all that stuff with the clocks? What's going on? Why does he have that plutonium?
They
He's
build up Doc so goddamn much before he arrives.
Dressed like a supervillain.
I will say, another really lucky accident with the film. Michael J. Fox is not a tall dude. Christopher Lloyd is not super, super tall. He's something like 6'1", if I remember right. So the difference in their height is sizable. To get around this, they have to do all sorts of creative framing ideas. Like in this one, Doc Brown has to be sitting down and sort of slouched. But when they're standing up and talking to each other, they're constantly kind of moving in different directions. Marty will move to the camera. Doc Brown will move away from the camera. So that way they can both be in the frame. And, one isn't towering over the other or having his head cut off. The benefit of this is it makes all the exposition so dynamic. You watch those guys running around the screen and just frantically gesturing and shouting out this time travel gobbledygook. And it doesn't matter. You kind of just buy into it and you feel excited. They're explaining science and I feel excited. That's amazing.
That's why you get Dean Cundy to film your fucking movie, man.
It's wonderful choreography. Just the idea of how do we get these guys together, not have them look boring or weird. They'll move. They'll move back and forth. And that's unusual. Even to today, if you see characters talking to each other, the big example I can think of is Peter Jackson hates doing exposition because he just thinks it's so boring. So he'll add as many cuts as he can to exposition scenes. Watch something like The Frighteners, and when characters are talking, he'll just like suddenly do a quick close-up, and then he'll pan back or jump back out, and it's quick cuts. That's how he adds the energy to him. He's just moving the camera as much as possible. This is the inverse of that. He has the actors move as much as possible, and I think this is a great solution.
Nah.
It draws you in with the longer takes, and you just follow the performances.
It's my
And
favorite
it creates
solution.
such amazing depth of field too, which you don't really see
definitely.
that much in modern movie making.
Well, it's not a
The world
comedy.
feels so alive.
Well, you think modern comedy, the approach right now is you want characters to sit down and improvise and throw out funnier and more outlandish jokes back and forth until they get the funniest combination of the script. Which is fine, but you can't plan around that. It's pure improv. It's just creativity. So the camera just kind of gets planted and you do cuts back and forth between the two actors shouting out different lines they think are funny that don't even necessarily have a great connection or flow. And I think that ruins some of the chemistry between the leads. It definitely ruins the dynamicism that's there, and it makes it feel a little more cut and paste. And you'll see that a lot too in a normal comedy made these days. There'll be an extended edition with like 30 more jokes crammed in when they don't have to meet a timeline and make the movie 2 hours long.
Yeah,
This is my old man way of saying comedies were funnier in my day.
Well, it's frustrating whenever you see perfectly good comedies ruined by that sort of thing. Like Easy A, the Emma Stone movie, is a great recent example. That movie has a really amazing award-winning script. That movie is borderline unwatchable because of the amount of bad ad-libbing that was crowbarred into it.
Yeah, and I don't want to get against ad-libbing here either, because there are great ad-lib parts to this movie. Tom Wilson brings a lot of his character to life just with his own thoughts, like Butthead. That was a thing he thought would be funny to throw in there. or make like a tree and leave, also his improv. So it can work. It can be added into the script and work naturally. But I think too much of it gets away from the fact that a lot of planning typically goes into the best movies.
No, I just think it's a matter of what you're shooting for. Like if you're kind of making just a sitcom of a movie, then yeah, I want to see a bunch of funny people just kind of goof around for 90
Yeah.
minutes. Whenever that gets inserted in movies that are plot focused, that can really create a whiplash of comedic tones.
Yeah.
For sure. And again, I complain about this, but I still love those kind of movies too. The Interview with Seth Rogen definitely is one of those films where it's like the improv back and forth and just kind of plant the camera, even though it's a plot-heavy film. But in that one, it all comes together for me anyways. So I shouldn't say that all movies that focus on that kind of improv set are wrong or bad.
No.
Look, if we didn't have improv movies, we wouldn't have Will Ferrell in The Wedding Crashers walking downstairs dramatically with nunchucks around his neck.
No, Doc, no!
But it's what's so impressive to me about this movie is how, like, going back to like the blocking, how many things that are so ingrained about what Back to the Future is, or what even Back to the Future created, like filmmaking wise, off of it, was from necessity. Like the blocking, which you consider like classic, like Back to the Future block, the walking back and forth. It's in every movie. You've seen things imitate that like 1,000 times since Back to the Future. Necessity. Like storytelling things. Marty has a brother and sister because of necessity, because of to get the ages right for like their parent and stuff. And it's not like done to me like haphazardly. Like you find a lot of movies are created, oh, it's a classic, and it was just kind of like, to the people making it, they kind of bullshit it together. But it's actually, there's a lot of artistry that goes into solving the problems that would arise with Back to the Future. Like, okay, we have A, how do we get to C? This is what we build B out of. Okay, now how do we get to D? And it's all just one, like, long road. They're just, like, building brick by brick.
Well, and every facet of production is impacted by these little changes, too. Before we were talking about the blocking, so just specifically the cinematography. But the fact that there's such a height difference between Marty and Doc Brown means Christopher Lloyd adjusted his performance and slouches a lot of the movie so he can be closer in height to Marty, which just becomes part of the character. How he reacts to everything is included in that slouch. Or even parts of it like casting. Like, okay, this love interest is too tall. We have to fire her and find someone a little shorter.
Or my favorite thing, like my favorite casting story in the world in this movie. We have to find somebody bigger than Eric Stoltz, who's very, very tall. So let's get Tom Wilson. Oh no, we have Michael J. Fox, who's 5'2". So King Kong is the villain of this movie now.
That works even better, though, when Michael
Exactly.
J. Fox goes to punch Biff inside of the cafeteria, and he stands up and he has to sell that he's so much bigger than him. He doesn't have to do much. He just has to stand up, and you believe, like, oh no, Marty's going to die here.
Biff feels like a special effect. I always thought he was forced perspective for the longest time. I didn't know Tom Wilson was just that friggin' tall.
How tall is Tom Wilson? Does anyone know offhand? I have
Like
the internet. I can look this up.
6'2", 6'3".
Something like that.
Oh, so he has no trouble on Tinder.
So,
Tom Wilson is 6'4", according to
Jesus.
Jesus.
Damn.
God
that is a
damn.
mountain of a man.
That's a basketball player there.
But even like the fact that the car is a DeLorean it's a DeLorean because of this scene. They need something to look like a spaceship. The doors of the DeLorean open that way. Oh, it looks like a spaceship. Let's use a DeLorean.
Oh, those darn gold doors.
Also, it's filled with cocaine, so if the movie doesn't work out, we can just sell this.
We can retire rich as Nazis.
I loved all the making of stuff where they're showing Michael J. Fox sitting inside the DeLorean trying to like energetically act in it and just beating the shit out of his hand, just like accidentally punching the dashboard or all the props they had inside of there. The DeLorean looks like a terrible car, but as a child, I imagined how cool it would be to have one. Also, Marty's just dead. Those bullets went through the door he was standing in.
It's okay. The DeLoreans are bulletproof. They can't go to 88 miles an hour, but they're...
Okay, I love how violent this goddamn shotgun is. When he blows up the mailbox, it's like the most impactful shotgun blast I've ever seen in my life. Look at that thing. They put way too much gunpowder in there
It's
for that
so
squirt or
cartoony.
whatever they used. I love it.
So, I've never in my life, in 28 years of watching this movie, gotten the Twin Pines joke until last week. That is such a beautiful, subtle joke.
My pines!
I don't think I got the sign was changed at the very end of the movie, the mall sign, until I was like 17.
Oh, someone had to tell me about it. I saw it like on IMDb.
Well,
I also,
this
this is the most obvious thing in the world. The Lyon Estates lines. For some reason, I was too dumb to ever connect that. Wait, that's where Marty lived. That's his house in that field. Just somehow I completely missed out on like obvious movie making 101 because he walks by those things. They're all graffitied up at the start of the movie, and it just never connected to me.
A lot of this stuff did get cut out in a lot of the cable plays, which, I mean, if you
Very
grew
true.
up in our generation, Back to the Future marathons on TNT were just what you did during the summer.
Yeah.
Right. That's the amazing thing to me about Back to the Future. It's such a big part of my childhood. I can't tell you when I first saw it. It was just always there. It's like your parents. When was the first time you met your dad? You don't remember. He's just always there.
Yeah.
So, like, Back to the Future, I just knew the plot, but I can't remember ever one time sitting down and consciously thinking, I should watch this. What is this? You just know it. You grow up with this knowledge of Back to the Future, kind of like it's math or something. It's a little weird.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the same for you guys, but this and Ghostbusters had the same effect on me as a kid. Whenever I'd get in trouble during first grade for drawing flux capacitors and proton packs in my book instead of listening to the teacher, these weren't comedies to me. Like I viewed them the way you view a Marvel movie now. Like, no, these are just science fiction stories that have comic relief in them.
No.
Like, I am invested in all of these stakes as if this were like a Martin Scorsese movie.
I have 2 points about that. One, with Ghostbusters, I actually do remember the first time I watched that. For some reason, I
Really?
missed it. I missed out on it till I was still pretty young. But my sister was hanging out at her boyfriend's house, and she had to like take me along to babysit. And I remember the boyfriend saying, "Hey, have you ever seen Ghostbusters?" And I went, "No, what's Ghostbusters?" And he's like, "Hey, buddy." And then he just sat me in a room and played Ghostbusters, and they went off and did whatever they did. And it
It's
was
awesome. Dan Aykroyd gets a blowjob.
It was perfect for them because they got to hang
So
out without
live.
like her little brother around, and I got to watch Ghostbusters. And it was one of those deals where you watch it for the first time, you're like, oh my God. Like you said, to me, Ghostbusters wasn't a comedy. It was a scary story with ghosts and scientists trying to beat ghosts. That movie works very well on young children because they can take it that way. They kind of can ignore the comedy elements and appreciate the other genre it's going for. Point two, the 1950s setting here, totally unrelated to everything we're just talking about.
Good.
We're on a studio lot, and it should be obvious. I mean, everything is so controlled here, and everything is so 1950s, you can tell they didn't just throw some set dressing on like a real business street somewhere. But that's perfect. In my mind, if you're doing a time travel movie where a character goes from the current time back to the past, there's always going to be that inherent element of foreignness, strangeness, idealization, nostalgia going on that a backlot kind of represents perfectly.
Yeah, I think
This isn't the
Zemeckis-
real 50s. This is like the imagined 50s of someone living, 30 years after that happened. Someone born 30 years after that happened, 20 years after that happened.
Yeah, I think Zemeckis like flat out said something to the effect of, yeah, we want it to look like a backlot because we want to make people nostalgic for 50s movies. Like,
Right.
we're not expecting people who remember the 50s to watch this movie. We want to get teenagers who have grown up watching movies set in these eras, which is really
Yeah.
a stroke of genius.
Yeah. And I think that's brilliant, and it works really well. Also, if you ever do the Universal Backlot Tour, uh, I believe it's the California one, they will kind of drive you around and show you some of the locations. The original courthouse tower area burned down, I think, in like the 90s, and they just rebuilt it the same way. But that area, that kind of commons area he walked by, has been used in dozens of different TV shows and movies in the past. And it's amazing because those guys have to go out there, and the deal they have, from my understanding on the tour, was production can essentially say, hey, we're taking the lot, and they can make whatever changes they want. They can like build a house. They can put grass all over what would be a parking lot and call it a field. But when they're done filming, they have to rip all that up and return it back to the original setting so the next production can go in and use it as they expect it to be, and then make their changes. So the area never actually changes permanently, but it changes constantly. Another point on the idea of iconic filmmaking, we had iconic introductions for Marty and the DeLorean, but the introduction for young George McFly is so understated, it undercuts everything I was saying before and is brilliant. Like, you see Marty sit down and you see George do the exact same hand motions, and you don't notice he's right there until Biff calls him out and pulls him up. And it works wonderfully as a joke. And instead of going the route of this is an iconic character, you realize this is a nothing character. Again, it serves the story, and it's funny, and it's a smart choice all around by the filmmakers.
Especially whenever you look at the end of the movie where you do get that like Alex Ross hero shot of George raising his fist at the end.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you're meeting that character for the first time at the end of the movie.
Well, that goes along with Silvestri's score. He gets kind of that swell of music, and you realize he is a hero now. What a man.
Also, hey, 50s Billy Zane, fetch me a dream.
It's too bad
Tunnel
you don't
snakes
get some
for
of the other
life.
scenes. Did he just lean back in the car to wave at us?
I'm sorry, Mike. That touched me deep inside.
Thank you. Also,
So this is the point you realize how good the old age makeup was. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
it has aged, haha, and there's some of the neck appliances that look like someone glued gills onto people.
Strickland is a monster.
Oh God, he's terrible. Someone kill him with fire. But compare to this, Crispin Glover at his natural age at the time of filming, compared to Crispin Glover as we've been introduced to him, and it's just such a night and day difference, and you buy it. Like, it's not perfect application work, but it's goddamn 1984 when they're filming this. It's not going to be perfect. It's pretty damn good though, and it holds up mostly well.
It's better than any of the makeup they used for the sequels, which has always
Ooh.
confused me.
They went too far in the old age.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I was a kid, it never occurred to me that Crispin Glover was young. I just thought I thought they did the Watchmen thing where, oh, they just cast a dude in his 30s and they aged him up and aged him down.
They found his dad or something. Hey, do you want to be in a movie?
That was
You're
Crispin
doomed.
Glover on a bicycle.
Also a weird thing to think about. Everyone, like, the popular culture of, the popular notion of Back to the Future is it's an effects movie. And that's definitely true of parts 2 and 3, but part 1, there's only a handful of special effects shots. There's a couple of practical effects like the old age makeup, but by and large, this movie does not have a lot of practical or special effects going on. It's actually kind of stunning when you back and think about it. Like, it doesn't fit into your notion of what the movie really is.
Yeah, it's the gimmick. It's not what the film is at all.
Also, does this scene always give you Halloween vibes?
Oh
Very
God,
much
yeah.
so.
Especially that opening shot where Marty's just standing like Michael Myers.
They had to have
Every
filmed in
time.
like the same goddamn neighborhood, right?
It looks so similar. So going back to like the 50s design, it never occurred to me until like looking at behind the scenes stuff and hearing people talk about it. As I always thought all the products throughout the movie were just done with like product placement deals. I didn't know they were done specifically because those companies had logos which changed between the 50s and the 80s. So they they chose some over other ones who they would have gotten more money from, but their logos were the same, so they chose not. So Zemeckis wouldn't go with them because he wanted the feeling of similarity. Like Marty would be in a place that had things that were similar that he's used to, but they'd be slightly different, so it'd be have an alien quality to it.
Oh yeah, and it works out great because you look at those logos and you're familiar with what they look like in 2019, and a lot of them actually are fairly similar to what you would have seen a decade or 2 or 3 decades ago. But all the way back to the 50s, that was a different ballpark for advertising. Also, a lot of companies that have gone out of business, so that's kind of fun too. When you see all that stuff like, oh wow, all the way back in the 50s, that's so long ago, most of these didn't survive. It's a fun history lesson.
Also, how she says Hope Chest always amuses the shit out of me.
It always feels like some weird, like super deep cut innuendo that you're not old enough to get. But no, it's just exactly what it sounds like.
Who has a hope chest, though? Really? Come on.
Was it Leah Thompson, an actress who's in this film because Eric Stoltz was once in this film?
It's amazing the weird 6 degrees of separation here. Like, Michael J. Fox wanted to be in this because he liked Crispin Glover when they worked together.
It all comes together. To back up just a second, they make a comment on the fact that he's wearing Calvin Klein underwear, purple underwear, and what a weird mind-bending thing this is for people in the 50s. But you think about it, 30 years isn't that long. That's, not even half the life expectancy of the average person in the United States. That's a pretty big change. Just to go from the idea of underwear doesn't have logos on it, or designer names, or color. And it's kind of fascinating from the 50s to the 80s what a big change that was. And now another 35 years later, from the 80s to now, how everything is so different for us, just looking at that shitty black and white TV's got to fiddle with, or the lack of technology, or how the cars are designed. And you realize that wasn't that long ago. The 1950s are not that long ago, and yet it feels like such an alien world. Things change fast. I don't like it. Change is bad.
Well, that's what's great about them using the dichotomy between 85 and 55, because, the mid-50s were
Nostalgia runs in 30-year cycles.
Yeah, pretty much. And the 50s were, right on the cusp of things beginning to change more rapidly.
Yeah, the invention of, Computation.
Well, listen, it's just...
I should have had supper tonight.
Once again, things I've taken for granted with this film, just from it being so used to having it around. When you start breaking it down, just watching it from a storytelling perspective, there's a whole point in this movie about the 50s, this pristine thing of nostalgia that you remember of better times, like what Lorraine was talking about and whatnot. The film's actually making a point 55, 85, pretty much the same thing, just has a different veneer on it.
It's just an attitude.
Yeah, it's they're watching TV during dinner just like they did in the 80s. A lot of...
it's just the technology's different.
Yeah, there's a lot of symmetrical jokes. Some are subtle, some are more obvious, that you just take as, they're symmetrical jokes. Oh no, they're actually a comment to things of the more things change, the more they stay the same. Strickland calling Marty a slacker, him calling George a slacker. It's a symmetrical joke for earlier in the movie, a reference back. It's a setup and payoff once again, but it's a comment on that theme.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, that's something about the ending that really never occurred to me. Because in preparation for the commentary, I just did something I don't think I've ever done in my life, and just watched the movies by themselves, days apart, to try to take them in as their own thing and not as one long movie, like they were always aired on cable. And when you watch the ending of this movie as the ending of this movie and not as a sequel tease, that clicks. This ending really is a joke. It's Marty McFly, the ultimate teenager, having to go into the future to teach his no-good kids a thing or two. Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's all in cycles.
I've always been fascinated by stories about like Pompeii because, everyone died there and was encased in ash. So everything was frozen in time. And you realize, oh, wow, they were really goddamn the same as us. Like they found one of a guy masturbating who just was surprised by the volcano killing him. There's graffiti that they've uncovered in Pompeii where it's all stuff like, for a good time, seek out so-and-so's name. It's really like the same kind of graffiti you would see in a gas station truck stop. Like, that was thousands of years ago, and it hasn't changed. I think people change, but we have guidelines. We're still basically the same as always been. Our humor hasn't maybe changed that much, but our settings have been evolved, so we kind of go along with that.
Oh God, look at the way we consume media. Like if there's anything that seems to have changed profoundly more, it's that. But you look at the Victorian era and Sherlock fans were fucking insane.
Oh God, yeah.
And
or stuff like lolcats. That was like a goddamn, in the 1800s, there were newspaper editorial cartoons that essentially used the same speech. It's fascinating to realize, all the stupid shit we did, they did theirs. They just had to put it on a printing press.
Victorian lolcats had funny captions about food that were phrased in baby talk. It's the same. Like what did people around the factory talk about back then on their lunch breaks? The new Charles Dickens novel. Like that was their water cooler conversation. The formula never changes, just the context.
That's a much better way of saying what I was trying to get at. Thank you.
That's what I do.
If only my drinks weren't gone. Okay, so this is a wonderful touch I've always really liked. Marty hanging on that lamp. And it's a small thing, but I think it's a choice probably brought about by the actor. I have no way of knowing that for sure. It's not like Zemeckis going to tell me, no, I directed him to hang on that lamp. In my mind, I feel like that's something Marty probably thought about. How do I interact with these props? And it's just a thing he did. He leaned against it while he was acting. And that's why Michael J. Fox makes this role work. He does those little things where he interacts with the world, he acts exasperated, he reacts to everything around him. He makes this character feel alive, which is something a lesser actor wouldn't be able to accomplish. They would stand there, say their lines with Doc, they wouldn't move, they would just spit it out, get done what was on the page, and then call it a day and go home. More impressive considering this is a guy who was also filming a sitcom in the morning, would jump in a van, drive to the set, start acting from like 6 to 2 in the morning, sleep on the way home for a couple of hours, then get up and start the sitcom job again. This is a man with no sleep, like a 22, 23-year-old who is just giving it his all on 2 separate projects. That's an amazing work ethic.
And think, for the sequel, he was doing that with a pregnant wife. Like, Michael J. Fox makes me feel like a lazy piece of shit.
I know, I hate him. How dare he?
What a goddamn god, honestly. A tiny, tiny god.
Then he has Parkinson's and he still does work in voice acting instead of giving up and feeling sad about himself. I hate him.
He made Spin City work.
No, it's true.
He made me feel empathy for Republicans.
Impossible.
I like how you reacted to that, like someone raising a cross to Dracula.
Jamie, in my house, I was actually doing the Dracula, like, hands across my face block. So you nailed it.
I know
all
your
the
sound
way
effects
across
so
the
well at
country,
this point.
from Minnesota to Alabama, just. As long as we're talking about Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, let's just spend a few minutes talking about these 2 actors, because god damn. Michael J. Fox brings to life this character who in a lot of ways be forgettable. He makes a guy that seems cool, like he can play guitar, he's got a hot girlfriend, he skateboards, but also has to be a nerd, like he gets beat up by Biff, he's not like actually leading the band at school. He's a bit of an underdog despite seeming cool. You want to be Marty, but you realize he's not as good as he could be. And Christopher Lloyd, the guy just gives such an energetic, weird performance that doesn't feel like he's doing an insane character that's just there for laughs. Like, obviously it's oversized, but what he's doing all works and connects and kind of fits in with his personality. Somehow he makes something that seems like a cartoon seem like a character, like a real person. And the two of them working against each other is just magical to watch. Case in point.
Okay, someone tell me if I'm wrong, but okay, so Doc's wearing a white tie against a white shirt.
Correct.
Now, is that a setup for him wearing a clear tie at the very end?
I would say
I could
not
easily see that.
direct. I wouldn't say directly, but I think they probably thought that joke was funny, and then separately thought, oh, a clear tie in the future is funny because it's purposeless, and just repeated the same joke essentially with a future setting on him.
So that sexy ass photo of Einstein up there.
Oh.
He makes Edison look okay.
And going back to like how good the old age makeup and the elderly performances are in this movie, I just always assumed Christopher Lloyd was in his 60s,
Right?
and
I
they
think
just
everyone
added
did,
some
yeah.
color to his hair for this. I never really noticed they put that much makeup on.
John Mulaney, in one of his recent comedy stand-ups, mentions this. Like, Back to the Future, it's a weird movie. Marty's going to be partnered up with a doctor who's 40 or 80. We don't know. Which might be the best possible way to describe Christopher Lloyd in any role he's ever had, until he was actually like 80. Then you realize, like, oh, that's what 80-year-old Christopher Lloyd looks like. So he's one of those guys I've just always assumed was 60 years old, like Leslie Nielsen. Like, I just assumed he was always old.
Like the only thing where he really looks young is Buckaroo Banzai, because I think he has like jet black hair in that.
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest too. He looks young in that, but same deal.
Oh,
Like, his hair is shorter and it's natural, like, like a brown.
Let's not even talk about Taxi, where he looks like fucking Lance Henriksen currently.
Oh yeah. Oh,
That was weird.
Weird.
Yeah.
let's moving past. Another weird thing about time travel movies. Actually, this is just a weird thing about time in general. I was reading the Dark Tower series a while back, and a character is impressed by the fact that vending machines take dollar bills. And I was so confused and blown away by that, because I'm like, my entire life, vending machines have taken dollar bills. And I remember that character was like from 1950, and they were traveling through time as the books progressed. It turns out vending machines that accepted dollar bills weren't invented until like 1965. And vending machines were first made in like the 1880s. It's just kind of crazy to me that there's that many changes within a lifetime. Someone could go from the 50s of thinking, oh, they've always been this way. They only take quarters, to give me a dollar bill. I want a Snickers.
Well, shit, in the first draft, all of the time travel footage was actually just recorded on a tape recorder because home video cameras weren't a thing in 1982.
Oh, I have to interrupt. So here we have a kick me sign. I have some history to share.
Oh no.
I had to look this up because I was confused and like a kick me sign. Did Back to the Future make the kick me sign? Or is that like a popular joke in the 50s, or where did it come from? Turns out way older than the 50s. So, April Fool's Day, was introduced in the 1700s to Scotland. It had kind of like originated in England, and France had gotten really into it, so Scotland got it. And Scotland loved April Fool's Day so much that they broke it into 2 days.
Jesus.
And the second day was primarily focused on ass-based pranks and jokes.
This is fucking magical.
So in Scotland, April
Bring it
Fool's Day
back.
2 was all about fart jokes and the invention of the kick me sign to kick people in the ass. So that
Of
got
course, it's from
ported
Scotland.
over into
Fucking of
popular
course.
culture because the Scots just loved kicking each other in the ass and saying April Fools. Okay, so another thing here, Crispin Glover's comedy reaction there of just being denied and kind of walking off
That's so subtle.
is so subtle and phenomenal, and no one will ever appreciate it. They always want to say Christopher Lloyd is amazing, Michael J. Fox is amazing, Biff is fantastic. That's all correct, but he gets underappreciated for the work he's putting in here. As a minor, kind of purposely designed forgettable character, he is doing everything he can to make his character hilarious.
Also, I love Man About Town, Doc Brown.
I love his hat so much.
It's a great look. What would you call that shirt? It's not really Hawaiian. It's not really paisley.
He's a rich man.
Old. It's old man.
So I got to go to a Goodwill apparently to find this.
I'm sure it's something one of the later Doctors Who will wear. But yeah, Crispin
Rhythmic
Glover
ceremonial
and Tom
ritual, by the way.
uh, what was it? Oh yeah, Crispin Glover and Tom Wilson really are the unsung heroes of this franchise.
I mean, Wilson, I feel like gets some recognition. People know him as Biff. Speaking of which, have you guys seen the postcard Tom Wilson gives out when people ask him about Back to the Future?
Oh, yeah.
I've got a copy up. I want to read it. Cut me off if there's more important things because it's fairly long.
I just want to say one thing in regards to Glover. Look at the one strand of hair out of place dangling down.
Apparently he was
so weird.
Apparently he was
Super
very
hair.
obsessed with his hair. I do want to bring up actually this scene. Once again, a scene no one ever really talks about. It's like it's kind of a heartfelt, kind of important scene, like between Marty and George, where Marty realizes something about his father. It's uncharacteristic almost for the rest of the film. You just get this stopping, serious moment where Marty actually gets to truly see like who his father is, like underneath all of the loserdom that he's used to. And they actually connect since they both are doing something creative that doesn't go anywhere.
Let the man publish his fanfic. So anyways,
That
Biff,
point.
Tom Wilson, is so sick of answering Back to the Future questions that when people approach him and ask him about it, he will give them this card that says, I'm Tom Wilson. I was in all 3 Back to the Future movies. Michael J. Fox is nice. I'm not in close contact with him. Christopher Lloyd is nice. He is a very shy man. Crispin Glover is unusual, but not as unusual as he sometimes presents himself. We got along nicely. Lee Thompson is nice. Eric Stoltz originally played Marty, but was fired due to performance issues. My first movie was shot in 1984 and 85. The sequels were shot back-to-back, never before attempted by a movie studio. The hoverboards didn't really fly. We were hanging by wires from a crane. The manure was made of peat moss, cork, dirt, and food agent that made it sticky. The DeLorean was an inferior automobile and nearly impossible for a person of normal size like myself to enter and exit. There are many tiny plot points hidden in the movie, but I don't know what they are. Among many improvisations on set, I coined the term butthead, as well as make like a tree and get out of here. The third movie was my favorite since I got to learn Western skills like riding, roping, quick draw, and shooting a 6-shooter, and a great adventure for a guy from Philly. I told my coworkers in the best light, I hold my coworkers in the best light, but have no idea what any of them are doing right now. Spielberg was an executive producer of the movie, but Zemeckis directed it. Nobody had any idea that the movies would become a cultural touchstone, but the themes of friendship and adventure moved the audience so powerfully that I felt the need to create this postcard as a time saver. It was the first movie I acted in, if you don't count being killed in the kung fu movie Ninja Turf. Love is more important than material possessions. I made less money than you think. I don't talk about the movies much because I'm busy with stand-up comedy and music performances. Those performances aren't near the magnitude of the movies, but I find them enjoyable and satisfying, so that's the area of my concentration. I performed on The Tonight Show with both Johnny Carson and Jay Leno, but not at the same time. I'm pleased and proud of my acting credits listed at www.imdb.com. And I'm a painter as well. You can contact me at www.tomwilsonusa.com. Thank you, and God bless you. The fact that he had these printed out and given to fans.
I love how that both communicates a lot of information, hypes up the franchise, and has many jokes. It's kind of a masterpiece.
And almost feels like a fuck you for asking me any of this kind of thing.
If I remember correctly, Wilson with his stand-up, like if he feels like if he starts a set and he feels like there's a lot of Back to the Future fans in there, so the jokes aren't quite working because everyone just is just going like it's Biff, it's Biff, it's Biff. He'll stop the set and do a quick like 5-minute Q&A session just so the audience can get everything out, and then he'll just go back to his set.
What a hang-up. Isn't that a shame? Like, the guy's so talented, and he's forever Biff.
Well, like Peter Weller has to begin each of his semesters with a RoboCop Q&A.
Oh, I would demand that if I was in his class.
I would demand a full RoboCop clash. What was it like to be both man and machine? Can I call you
Kane.
Murphy or Professor?
Tell us about those metal underpants. How did you move?
Can we
How
talk
many
about
times did you have to
screamers?
pretend to catch the keys?
God, nobody can be perplexed by literally everything quite like Crispin Glover.
I mean, look at that. I love his notepad.
All right, and we moved past the scene, but it was fascinating seeing the extended version of the Darth Vader scene on the Blu-ray for two reasons. One, I never realized Marty sleeping with his ass in the air was set up to a joke about a Glover sleeping in the exact same position. I just thought that was a weird thing Michael J. Fox did.
That's how people pass out in bed. Also, look, it's the
This.
coolest George McFly will ever be, while still making it look dorky as hell. Milk, chocolate. Just
Whiskey face.
someone just randomly slings that to him like they were waiting for someone to order a fucking milkshake. Sorry, and I cut off your second point, I believe.
But more importantly, that's just a textbook example of the economy of this movie in its final form. Because in the commentary, Gale just flat out says, yeah, after my name is Darth Vader, I come from the planet Vulcan. Why is the scene still going? That's the funniest joke. Like, the other jokes are funny, but he says those two things. Smash cut to Darth Vader came down from the planet Vulcan and told me I had to ask Lorraine or he'd melt my brains. That's boom, boom, boom. That's like a 3-part joke. Like, why would you have anything else there?
Another moment of happy happenstance. George McFly says his density lines like in this weird whisper, like, yes, I'm George McFly. And apparently that was the lucky accident of Crispin Glover losing his voice during production. So he was just trying to say his lines, but really only had like a hoarse whisper that he could get him out in. But it's such a weird way to say that stuff. It fits the moment perfectly, but it feels so awkward. Which I have to say, that is such a terribly awkward scene. I have a hard time getting through watching it.
Oh, yeah.
Just I'm your density, and the disgusted look he gets from the girls in the back. But I do like the fact that Lorraine is actually kind of into it. Like, someone's talking to her, and she's just like, hey, cool, attention, this guy's not so bad. He's cute in his own dweeby way. A detail I never really got until recently, like the adoring look she gives him when she's curious about it while everyone else is disgusted.
Oh, yeah. You actually pay attention. There's actually a lot planted between Lorraine and George, so it's not actually as out of nowhere at the end as you think.
Yeah.
Lorraine is not as like super focused on quote-unquote Calvin Klein as it appears at first.
Yeah, Lorraine Baines is like secretly, both acting-wise and writing-wise, one of the greatest like female characters of the 80s. There's so much going on with her from scene to scene. Like a surprising amount of complexity.
Marty, you dick.
All of his papers. Those Goosebumps books are spreading throughout the 50s now.
Oh, no.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, so now is a perfect time in my mind to talk about Alan Silvestri's goddamn stud of a score.
Listen to it.
I really like that I stopped right as the score swelled. I was like, yes, I did it. The man scores I mean, this is, I would say, his most famous set of scores, Back to the Future 1, 2, 3. He's done tons of other things, like he did the score for the first Avengers film and set that theme for the other composers to pick up and run with. He did the score for Predator. He's done famous things, but this is Silvestri's hallmark in my mind.
This
And
is Williams.
It makes the movie. Without that triumphant big score, I think this movie goes from being a fun romp to an epic adventure.
Oh yeah.
The size is doubled by those swelling chords. Like he just makes the movie feel so much bigger with the music. Plus, I really love the story in the documentary that Spielberg was watching a rough cut of the film with temp music and some score, and he kept complaining that he didn't think Silvestri is the right man for the job. And while a scene like that was going, where Silvestri is really hitting it, he leaned over to one of the Bobs and said, "This is the score you should have, some John Williams stuff." And they had to tell him, "Well, that is the score the movie has. That's it. That's Silvestri." And he backed off after that. Like he went, "Okay, I understand now."
Well, something I found really enlightening that Bob Gale said was the influence of Frank Capra is all over both everything he and Zemeckis do
God,
together, but
the
also
way the characters
this movie.
move. Just if you ever watch a Capra movie, characters are fucking flopping around and moving. They move like these characters do, and it's a point I probably wouldn't connect naturally, but it makes sense when someone says it.
Definitely explains a lot of part two, but that just goes back to the Silvestri score. Like Frank Capra movies, both cinematography wise and with the music, weren't filmed like quaint little family movies. Like It's a Wonderful Life is scored like it's an epic, like it's King Henry VIII or something. Like it's scored like it's the Ten Commandments, which gives it that larger than life feel when it's just a story about some guy in a town.
For what it's worth, I think this might be the funniest moment in the movie, and I always forget it exists.
By and large.
I mean, the third act of every old Doctor Who episode.
Just the look on Doc's face when the car starts a fire, and the fact the car starts a fire, and Marty is just, "Oh no."
Oh, as a kid, the fact that there were models always destroyed me.
He took all the time to make the rest of the town, even though the car goes in a straight line.
Did he already
And he
have
didn't
the
have
models?
time to
is
paint
the
it.
question.
It goes
the
on
timing
for
on the
so
scene
long.
follows as he watches it move. The fire starts. Whoa! That gasp. Whoa!
And once again, what I love, if this is a modern movie, there'd be like a pratfall sound effect or score or something. There's nothing really in seeing the scene calling attention this is even a joke. It's just, it's a joke because it's a joke.
I think in the hands of lesser filmmakers, that fire would have just engulfed the barn. Like the whole garage would have gone up in flames right there to really sell. Like, oh no! Instead, he puts it out in 3 seconds. It doesn't matter. It doesn't hamper the plot, but it gives Doc that great moment of oh.
Also, I love Doc's garbage can filled with paint cans and oily rags he keeps around. No wonder that place burned down eventually.
I'm Doc Brown, and I don't want to be in this scene.
God, now that I think about it, it is incredible restraint that they didn't just cut to the mansion being burned down and that's how it happened in this timeline.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure that popped into their head for a second. Like, no, that's too much.
My favorite Christopher Lloyd performance in this movie.
There's a lot of, young Frankenstein. He's really playing like the Frankenstein monster for half of it.
Very much so.
It's the wide eye. It's a very good Peter Boyle impression.
Well, it made a lot of sense whenever I heard Lloyd say that he based his performance on the composer Leopold Stokowski, because apparently Because, of course, Christopher Lloyd is a huge classical music buff. And look at videos of Stokowski conducting, and yeah, you can kind of see some Doc Brown in there. It's very much what you picture in your head, what an old-timey conductor would be. He's very Looney Tunes.
Well, it makes sense. They got to sell the motion so everyone in the back, you got to playing fucking tuba understands what's going on. This is way back in the movie, but we talked over it, so I didn't have a point to mention it. There was a Ronald Reagan was a president joke, and those never get old. Like, people are still making those jokes now. But I feel like in the future, if we go 5 years to the future, those are going to be eventually supplanted by Donald Trump was a president jokes. Like, that's my hope. Like, in 10 years, everyone's going to be like, what's a weird thing you guys did? He was a TV guy.
America won't exist in 5 years, Cody.
We can all hope we're dead
we'll,
by then.
we'll be watching live streams from President PewDiePie.
Oh, God, kill me now.
It's just never occurred to me Glover was doing that with holding a bra.
Huh.
I never noticed that either.
Well done, Glover. Well done. You know, that was a decision he made.
Now, it may have just been an actual reaction. We don't know. We don't know what his romantic life was like in 1984.
That's why he wasn't interested in Lorraine. He was getting it left and right.
Going back to the Reagan thing, like another thing I never noticed until this month, the subtle joke of a shitty Ronald Reagan movie playing for half off at the theater that in Marty's time just plays All American Orgy.
I'm sure there was about 800 other jokes in this movie we've never noticed.
Well, that's the thing, too. I bet a lot of this would work much better if this was the 80s. You know, like, we understand when Marty's in the diner and he asks for a tab, what he's asking about, or a Pepsi Free. But, I mean, the Pepsi Free is more context because we don't have Pepsi Free anymore. But, I mean, culturally, we know what tab is. I think, don't they make tab again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that joke probably played a little more when those were new novel concepts instead of like things that were either extinct and brought back or just extinct. But I'm sure the movie's filled with that kind of stuff, really. It's not trying too hard to not be a product of the 80s.
Well, something that absolutely blew my mind when I heard Zemeckis and Gale say it during a Q&A, which is the ending of this movie that everyone in our post-cracked media landscape likes to make fun of for all of its, its materialistic, mean-spirited, Reagan-era overtones, is supposed to be a joke. I think Zemeckis flat out says, yeah, nobody in America seemed to get that. The people, like the reviewers in Europe, thought it was funny as hell. But yeah, people just took that at face value.
It's just something that lives and dies the time that it was created. Like, it wasn't really saying anything necessarily. It's only through the passage of time that it starts to look like something else. You know, at the time, it was just the ending of the movie is everyone's happier. Lorraine's not alcoholic. George found himself. So through that, they're just more successful. Like, and it's, kind of like, yeah, that's kind of the 80s American thing, is you get kind of, you're kind of yuppies. It's both a joke and just kind of sincere, and it's only in the modern context that it looks like, oh, they're, Reagan's America yuppies, and thank God Marty has a new car and shit.
Yeah, I feel like it's supposed to play a way more, not cartoony, but like almost like the Wayne's World 1 super happy ending.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they're the richest people in town, and he has a new car.
It's
feel
like a funny ripple
part of
effect.
that is kind of a retrospective opinion of it from the Bobs. I'm going to get into that at the end of the movie. We can focus on what's going on now, but I have thoughts. I'll save for later. So just a moment before this, we saw Doc Brown essentially bribe a police officer to let him do weird science experiments he doesn't understand in the middle of town.
Oh, you mean that scene where it plays out like it's a noir and he's going to kill the cop with like a crowbar he has in the trunk?
I think that's the hint of darkness that sets up this scene where all of a sudden Lorraine is taking drinks of alcohol, she's smoking cigarettes, in a much darker, not funny sense. Biff comes to like fucking date rape her in a second. Like the movie actually has a lot of darkness that rears its head right now-ish. And some of it's played off for laughs, some of it's just kind of, they shrug and say, hey, this is bad. But I like the hint that we're going to get into it more with Doc doing that little bribe. Because that was easily a scene they could have just ignored.
Yeah. Once again, it's something that I think is really missing from a lot of comedies today, that this has a tone that just exists in Back to the Future, much in the same way Ghostbusters has a tone that exists purely in Ghostbusters. It's not, there's no notes going, this needs to be more family friendly, or this needs to be more, I mean, granted, it's got turned down throughout the early 80s because it wasn't Porky's, but there's no forcing of a specific tone so it can like make these weird, random, dark jumps between something that's fairly like Saturday afternoon at the movies with grandma to Biff nearly date raping Lorraine, and it's like it's something unto itself.
Yeah, and that's another thing I like I said that's kind of missing from modern movies is the escalation of tension, not through like direct conflict or through action, but through a darkening of tone, which is something, especially movies from the 80s, pulled off very well.
I'm sorry, something really gross is on the screen.
Oh God, something's awakening inside of me, Marty.
Thank God this isn't just Futurama. Of course she's your grandmother!
It was such a no-brainer when the two Bobs were explaining that their light bulb moment of how to resolve this plot was having Lorraine be the one to resolve it and be the one to back off. Like, oh, that's actually fucking brilliant then. And you get the funny joke line.
Yeah, that's something I really appreciate just from a screenwriting standpoint. You have that, and then you have George's hero turn ending up having nothing to do with anything Marty's doing.
Yeah.
It turns out Marty's scheme doesn't work at all. George just makes the decision himself to be a bigger man. Like that's genius character work.
But it does set it up nicely, because Marty's scheme gets George to the right place to make that decision on his own.
Yeah,
which works out. It's not like he just shows up randomly. He goes there to do their plan and then realizes the situation has changed. It changed and he adapts accordingly. But I like it. It ties everything together well while still giving agency to the characters.
They can kind of have their cake and eat it too there. Also, I love the clown car filled with jazzmen.
Also a weird thing, because the movie is pretty whitewashed until this point. Like, there's one other black character, and we see him just working in a store, and everyone just treats him regular, like, he's the help. And then right here, we finally get a first, like, real bit of racism, like 50s true racism, when one of them gets called a spook. And it's just a weird intrusion of all of a sudden, like, oh, right, the 50s were kind of terrible. One of the weird things, if you ever read, time travel science fiction, for white people, great, go to the past, it's a fun time. If you're black and, like, someone says, hey, we've got a time machine that goes to the 1800s, your response would be, no, thank you. Perfectly fine not going to the 1800s.
If you are literally anybody but an old British man, you should not time travel. Peter Cushing can time travel, that's it.
Yeah, if anyone's ever read Kindred, it's one of those situations like, nope, don't do it. It's going to be okay for your white husband. Everyone else will be miserable.
Also, going back to just how so much of this movie works because it's played straight and filmed like it's not a comedy. This scene is legitimately horrifying.
It's dark, and even the score reflects that too. It takes on a different timbre, and it's trying to impress upon you. No, this is pretty bad.
Once again, it's filmmaking over pigeonholing a genre.
Very much so. I got that fucking fish look that Gulliver gets. That perfect twist. That has to be one of the most hard-hitting punches in movie history.
And it's from Crispin Glover.
We have such a long build-up for it, and the score building it up, and it kind of transitions from a horror moment into this kind of love theme. The score sells what a dramatic change has just been made by this one punch.
There's something very magical about it specifically being the Back to the Future theme playing romantically. It makes you feel like everything you've been watching has been part of this one epic adventure.
So earlier, Mike, you made the point that everything in the film. Oh, wait, here's some weird story logic. Bob's point out, we understand that it doesn't make any sense that people would slowly disappear from a photo. But, I mean, hell, the audience understands it, right? You see people slowly disappearing from a photo, you know Marty's only got so much time before he's screwed. It's just a good visual indicator of the situation. It doesn't make sense, but who cares? It's a movie, it's all fake. I was making a point before that, but I've forgotten it, so we'll just have to leave it.
You said I brought something up, and you're going to expand upon it?
Well, no, I'm not, because I can't remember what it was.
We'll talk about it halfway through part 3.
I remember it now. Mike, the point you brought up earlier about the movie story being set up to constantly build on itself, and there's not fat. Everything is in service of this has been set up, this must be executed. This, I feel like, was the stumbling point. And even the filmmakers, I think, would recognize the same. You have that triumphant moment with George where he smacks Biff, and the photo starts coming back to life, and you realize, hey, things are working. And you really could have actually ended the movie there. You could have been like, hey, good, George and Lorraine hook up. Marty just has to get to the future. Instead, we have several climaxes. We have this moment where they have to have Marty finish the song. We have George have to kiss Lorraine. We have to get Marty back to the future. And then the epilogue where he has to meet his new family and deal with Doc coming back into his life and Doc not actually dying. The movie's moving so smoothly, it actually feels like the punch-out should be the conclusion and then a couple of minutes just to wrap things up. But instead, there's a lot of film left. There's so much going on after this. In my mind, it kind of starts a start and stop feel that doesn't flow as naturally as the rest. The movie has so much goodwill, I can deal with it, but it kind of makes you feel like, oh, it's time to use the bathroom. Well, maybe not. I guess there's more happening. Are the Eagles coming now? Can I go? What's happening?
I feel like I understand your point.
I'm sorry, that was my favorite shot in the movie of Marty hopping back up kind of magically. they kind of speed
His legs are back.
They just kind of, I don't know if it's like reverse footage or if they speed ramped it slightly to get him to hop back up and play the guitar. But that weird cinema language of, he's healthy now, works so well. I love it. It's hokey, but I love it.
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent that as far as the construction of this movie goes, this is the part that's maybe the shakiest screenplay-wise. But again, going back to like the stuff with George's character, it's really satisfying that they put one final button on it that no, it's actually George's decision to go after Lorraine. Like he actually has been changed by this experience. He's not going to let people push him around.
Yeah,
it's
you can
not
justify all
one
the stuff.
rosebud.
Yeah, like he has to prove his character worth, and here Marty gets to show off his rock and roll skills, which was set up before, but it really feels like they're just trying to prove a set piece point. Like, here's him inventing rock and roll.
Well, I think the Johnny B. Good thing is kind of wonderful for two reasons. One, it is payoff for Marty invents rock and roll. It's a funny joke. But two, it's also, okay, he has resolved the problem of George and Lorraine getting together. He fixed it. He made things better, even though we don't quite know to what extent yet. But he fixed it. So this is the movie stopping and going, "I'll just celebrate how much fun this is for a minute."
It just throws itself a party.
Yeah, like
They had a hard time throwing this in because they realized like it's kind of a break from story-driven scenes.
in a modern
This
film,
one's-
the studio would be trying to remove this so much right now.
Yeah, it's kind of it. It's not essential to the plot. It's just kind of a fun moment to have. And from a pacing standpoint, I would agree that you could just drop it. But, it's a classic moment of the film, too. It pays off. People appreciate it. So maybe it's wiser to sacrifice some of the smoothness of the plot for the jankiness of the fun of the moment.
Yeah, and it gets a nice breather before we get into the next tense bit when we get to the conclusion of the other issue that Marty has to deal with. But I think it says a lot. The Johnny Be Good bit is considered like this amazing, like classic piece of cinema everyone kind of remembers, and it's referenced a lot. And in the context of the film, it means nothing. I think it's like it's almost like a screenwriting lesson. It's like you can have something be classic, be great, and it doesn't necessarily have to serve any part of your story. You just have to do it correctly and pick your moment and pick your spot.
Well, also, I think it's very, very small, but you do get kind of a nice small character moment with Marty kind of bombing
Yeah.
and not caring.
Yeah.
Like,
It turns
oh,
out rock and
I-
roll is never invented in the future because he fucks up so bad here.
And and he gets to be the guy playing on stage, which is like his dream. So it's a nice double, kind of double thing going on between, Marty and his family. Like George has found himself and Marty gets to do what he's always wanted.
It's a little weird, though, that Marty just finished fucking up the previous song. Like, he's dying, so he can't quite finish the chords. The band has only met him like 10 minutes ago when he popped out of their trunk and claimed he could play guitar. And then all of a sudden they turn around and they go, "Hey, why don't you show us some new music?"
It's the 50s and he's white. Like, you were just allowed to do whatever you wanted.
You take over
True.
the band, it's yours. It's one of those deals where sometimes movies have funky plotting, but as long as you have goodwill going, people will just brush it off.
Hey, sometimes a lobster talks.
What lobster are you eating?
And then we just end the commentary there.
The movie's not even done. We just all go home.
I will
Gives you
never
some
get tired.
oddly specific advice.
I will never get tired of the sweet, emotional Back to the Future theme. So I like to think whenever Marty makes his exit there, Lorraine just says to George, "That's a really sweet kid, that Calvin Clyde. Too bad he's gay." Because honestly, what else does Lorraine think after that scene?
It makes the most sense in fiction.
So to this day, I will occasionally just look at various things whenever I'm waiting and just say, "Damn."
Damn.
The lawsuit from Christopher Lloyd is a staggering amount. Like, it might go so much money if it ever goes to trial.
I was
God.
frozen today.
That was one thing I actually wanted to bring up. Is part of the magic of this movie in general is it's a family movie that's a little bit naughty, but your
Yeah.
parents can't really say you can't watch it. And one of the things in particular I've always loved is that little bit of selective cursing. Like Marty shouting "bastard" at the beginning of the movie when it's the Libyans is that was the first time I ever heard the word bastard, and I used it in casual conversation like at some point when I was like not three, but like 4 or 5 and got sent to my room. And that's burned into my brain as the first time I ever got in trouble for cursing.
See, the same thing
Because
happened
I'm
to me
Marty
with
McFly.
Wild Wild West got me. I was watching that movie and Will Smith says something like, damn, and I was just like, that sounds cool. Will Smith is cool. So I said it to like a friend in casual conversation, and then she was like, what? You said a terrible thing, and then tattled on me immediately to my family.
But your friend tattled to your mom.
Exactly, yeah, it was a betrayal. We're not
What
friends
So
anymore. We don't
strange.
talk. That was the end of a friendship.
Fucking narc.
I was having a fun time swimming in July, and all of a sudden I couldn't say damn anymore.
I love how
So,
Marty
yeah.
and Doc are best friends.
I know.
Through
With no
time.
backstory or explanation. Because you don't need it.
You don't fucking need it. Why? How does the flux capacitor work? I don't know. The plot is Marty travels
Plutonium.
backwards through time.
This isn't Primer. Shut up.
That's what was fascinating about. There's a little mini documentary on one of the Blu-ray discs where they speak to Dr. Michio Kaku about how the time travel is portrayed in the movie, and you go into it expecting a Neil deGrasse Tyson takedown about how no, that's not how quantum physics works. Literally, the only thing that's inaccurate about the science that's portrayed in this movie is you'd need a lot more energy than 1.21 gigawatts to travel through time. That's it. Everything
You can't
else
get the
is
science wrong if you don't portray the science.
like this. There have been many, many famous accredited physicists who have gone on record as saying Back to the Future is literally the only movie that gets time travel correct.
Yet it's the one that's always like gets the most jokes about its use of time travel.
Well, I mean, DeLoreans can't actually go up to 88 miles per hour, so there's one problem with reality.
Depends how much cocaine you put in that gas tank.
The cars only went to 85. I don't care about the drugs.
You say this is a fucking Ralph Nader, Cody.
The war on DeLoreans has begun.
We are gonna get some pissed off DeLorean fans listening to this commentary. I hope you know.
They look so cool from the outside, but I'm a tallish person. I wouldn't fit inside one well. I'd bang my hands against the inside. I need room.
Everyone who owns a DeLorean swears it's an incredible car, and I don't know if that's because that's true or it's just so hard to get and restore one. You don't want to go that far and then say it's a bad car.
I feel like if I had a DeLorean living in Minnesota, like, forget about it. I'd drive around the winter and that little roller skate would just go directly into a snowbank and they would not find my corpse until, June. The bells!
Oh, hey, statue from Cat People.
That still fucking blew my mind, melted my brain.
It makes
It's
sense.
sticky.
Props just sit around and wait to be reused. Kind of
True.
like the comic book earlier in the film when Marty crashes into the barn was reused in an episode of 30 Rock, even though, or I'm not 30 Rock, 30 Rock from the Sun.
I was about to say.
Just because Universal had that on the prop, I don't know, shed, wherever they keep comic books.
Shit.
It's not from a real comic book. It was just one they made up for this movie, and it just sat around. So someone must have used it and went, here's your sitcom. Use this to read.
I love stock props. The reason Jason is technically a deadite.
I connected to Creep Show. Fucking random.
Going back to what we were saying earlier about the how this movie proves that you only need as little setup as possible if you can sell like what's in the movie. One of the most profound moments I had, like listening to Bob Gale just talk about why the scenes that were cut out of the movie were cut, is every single scene that they had to cut out of the movie is either characters discussing the plot of the movie with no new information or answering questions that the audience didn't have. Like, one of the deleted scenes is Brown opening up the suitcase that future Brown put in the DeLorean, and you see the hair, the hair dryer, and yeah, there's nothing to that scene. It's literally just there to establish that there's a hair dryer for the Darth Vader scene, and nobody ever asks why he has a hair dryer in his belt.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
never
that's-
occurred to me.
Nope, never thought about that until you mentioned it. Now the movie's ruined.
Yeah, it's like that's something I've been thinking about so much as far as like my own writing. It's like, yeah, a lot of really good writers do waste time answering questions the audience does not have.
Well, somewhere back in the day, someone watched the movie and then complained about, oh, there's a hairdryer for no reason. And if this movie is made today, they have internet forums where they could go and complain about it, and it become just a huge problem.
Oh, Bob Gale is enraged to this very day by a letter he got from a young Japanese boy pointing out that Marty's letter at the end doesn't match the one he writes in the diner.
I'm slightly exaggerating my point from before. I think in the current age where you can easily screen cap and, go frame by frame through a movie, it's very easy to pick out all these continuity things, and fans will go through and find them and share them much easier than they could before. But if a movie's good, people are just going to shrug and kind of just go, whatever, I don't care. They'll be fine with there being incongruities. But if the movie isn't working for them, those are the first things they're going to bring up. Those are the surface details they're going to throw a fit over. Or if they're just a terrible person, they'll just throw fits over it anyways. I shouldn't put it just on the time. I think sometimes people are just crappy fans.
I want to take a moment to mention something, an unsung facet of film that's not talked about, but god damn it, is Back to the Future a masterclass in its sound design.
Oh, definitely.
Everything in this sequence from a sound design perspective is it's delicious.
The weird X-Wing sound with the DeLorean moving around.
This is like sound designed like it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. Is it any Bohemian Rhapsody?
Well,
Topical humor.
Way to date us.
all those close-ups. But yeah, it's another way of just taking something that could have just been really not that much of an ending for a 2-hour movie. Just Doc Brown has some difficulty connecting a chord. But just the way it's shot and the most impressive sounding lightning ever, that Universal monster movie lightning, like it just makes it feel like this is the end of the world.
Well, I should mention too, I said before that the clock tower actually burned down on the Universal backlot. It burned down because of a lightning strike. Only fitting. I am pretty sure they rebuilt it like the same way, just for fans to see it and go, oh, the clock tower. And again, they use it for like 1,000 other things anyways.
See, what they should have done was make the clock start working after that. I love this so much.
This movie can
Shouting
make one so
gleefully.
giddy. Then I just wait for Mario to run behind him. You expect it every time.
That's the incredible thing about this franchise. It's like this and Evil Dead are the only 3 movies you can watch as one long movie. Like even the Lord of the Rings trilogy has time jumps. And because of that, everything just kind of melds together in your head.
Yeah.
Boy, I don't know about you guys, but I really want some California raisins. The product placement that went horribly awry.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite behind the scene stories ever. Like, apparently a shady dude from their like product synergy department like wanted them to shove raisins into every scene after making a deal with the California Raisins Board. Because apparently they promised them that they would do for raisins what E.T. did for Reese's.
And,
So in that version of the movie, we were just gonna have these weird David Lynch scenes of everyone just eating delicious, delicious raisins.
just bowls of just
Nom,
shoveling
nom.
bowls of Crispin Glover eating dramatically a bowl of raisins. And what I love is Zemeckis asked like, oh, what like specific brand of raisin? Just raisins.
The concept of raisins.
Raisins. Give us the raisins. Dry the grapes. Feed them to us.
What's maybe more insane is whenever they reduced the product placement down to just that park bench, the board was fucking livid because they'd already paid the studio in full, like for complete brand integration, and they threatened Universal with a lawsuit, and the Bobs took the side of the California Raisin Board over the studio that had produced the movie they just filmed. There was a
Well, they
moment
clearly
where
screwed those raisin folks over.
there was a moment where Robert Zemeckis had to go, "I'm sorry, Universal. I'm siding with the California Raisin Board over you."
I'm
That's
taking
the
the
line was
raisins.
said. So yeah, Universal just had to refund their check. So that is 100% free product placement in one of the biggest movies of all time.
To be fair, the product placement here is a homeless guy sleeping on your bench. It's not really a great association for the raisin folks.
And it's product placement for raisins.
The
Yeah.
concept of raisins.
It might have been worse if like the Libyans were eating raisins before they murdered Doc Brown. But
I love how torn up Marty is by dead Doc Brown.
my only friend.
It's something I really love about this is there is such like conviction in relationships in this movie. You really don't see, especially with like teen movies, which this is. Like this is a teen movie,
Yeah.
technically, but it's like Marty and Doc are best fucking friends. Like Doc is almost like a surrogate father or big brother to Marty, and Marty and Jennifer are truly in love. No bullshit. There's nothing more to their. They are just like sincerely in love, which you also don't see very often.
Yeah.
Like Marty is a very sincere character. I think that's why he's kind of stood the test of time.
But also flawed, which makes him fun. Like when he's talking to his girlfriend and then immediately starts checking out other girls in front of her.
Well,
Like,
what is
Marty,
he, chicken?
you dingbat. All right. So to return to an earlier point, Marty's going to walk into his room, fall asleep, wake up, and then see the changed version of his family. His dad is going to now be a successful something who happens to be an author, goes out with his wife to play tennis. They're wearing nicer clothes. It's a nicer house. His siblings are now more successful as well. His brother has an office job. His sister has tons of boyfriends. Marty owns a brand new truck. And the debate here is, are they going too far in showing that success means money? If you have money, are you happy? Now, one opinion that the Bobs have given is this was kind of meant as a bit of a joke, kind of commenting on the times, you would say, of the 80s-ness of it all that other places got. My concern with this comes from Crispin Glover. So inside the commentary, Gale makes many mentions that Glover was unusual and hard to work with. One of the things he really stresses was in this last scene, they had a hell of a time filming because Glover refused to wear the clothes they wanted him to wear. And he frames it as just an unusual request, like he just hated wearing those specific tennis clothes. If you go out and listen to interviews with Glover, he frames it in a different way, and he says his complaint was he objected to the content of the ending. When he was reading the script, he felt it was way too materialistic, and he felt that happiness was tied too closely to the material gains the characters made. And Zemeckis apparently chewed him out for this because he felt it was a fun joke and he was making too much of this thing and he didn't want to rewrite it. So in Glover's mind, the way he portrays this in recent interviews a couple of years back, it's not the clothes specifically he's mad about, it's the fact that he's dressed up as a yuppie when he felt he should have been still kind of like a middle management kind of guy who's just more confident now. And that's what his complaint was. And Bob Gale hated this and was mad at working with him from this. And in the sequel, when he wasn't brought back in, Gale kind of screwed him over. There was a lawsuit. And Glover feels the bad blood kind of tainted Gale's commentary. If you look at the 2 points, that one, Glover just hated to wear clothes and was screaming about it, or that Glover was an actor and really didn't feel this fit how the movie should go, I feel like I would tend more towards Glover's portrayal of the story. I mean, the truth has to lie somewhere in between. I don't think any one character in here is 100% right in their telling of the story or honest.
I do think it is important to take into fact that Glover is kind of an insane asshole as well.
He did want to wear a tank top.
In the interviews he's done, like, he seems pretty well controlled and explains his point in a fairly rational way. Like, he's not screaming at Anthony and Opie like, I was robbed! So I trust him a little bit on it. I feel like Gale taking the time to, smack talk him on a Blu-ray commentary where he's not involved is a bit of a low blow, which prejudices me against his point of view.
Well, I mean, Glover was a total dick when it came to, what happened after this with the lawsuit and all that, which was just Glover wanting money. I love Glover.
Well, we'll get into that too, because there's
there's
Glover
a lot of
very
sadness
different
related to the
viewpoints
second
compared
movie.
to Bob Gale on that point as well. But that's a sequel talk moment.
I'm sure Glover was probably semi-self-aware about this ending a bit. I really don't think it was much of the material value of this ending was really on many people's minds and they were making it. I think it's something that kind of exists as a middle-class white American dream from the 80s, so it really only works in the year 1985, really. When, it's just more or less saying George asserted himself more and things were happier, so Lorraine's not an alcoholic, and everyone had a better upbringing, and...
Yeah, but you can make all those points, too, without them being like, hey, the brother's a proper member of society now. He wears a tie and goes to an office.
Once again, it was the 80s, though, so that is, you can post, commentate it with that after the fact, but if you look at it purely at the lens of the time, there's nothing particularly out of the ordinary about it. Michael J. Fox was on Family Ties the exact same time, the most popular sitcom in America.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with the way you can look at Ghostbusters these days and think, oh, there's a lot of weird Reagan deregulation stuff baked in here. That's not really because anybody making that movie was in any way right wing. That was just what was in the pop culture. Of course we need deregulation. Of course the government's sticking its nose where it doesn't belong. That's common knowledge. It's only with foresight we can look back at that stuff and say, wait, people believe that shit because of propaganda. None of that was true.
Yeah.
Funny enough, Glover actually used the term propaganda when he's talking about the ending and why he was so mad about it.
That sounds like Crispin Glover. And I will say, as far as the wardrobing goes, I kind of agree with Glover. I think wanting to walk out with spiky hair and a tank top was a bit much, but
yeah,
I do kind of agree. I don't think that version of the future version of George 100% meshes with where I think George would be. I do kind of see George becoming more of a laid-back bohemian dude than a proper yuppie, but then again, at the same time, it's like you said, yeah, that's just what being successful looked like.
Yeah, I mean,
that ending would have weirded people out if he was just like our version of what a happy rich person was. If he was like a tech bro in jeans and slippers.
Yeah, it's almost like shorthand through clothing choice. When he should be more of like a vaguely like be more into accepting his own eccentricities as being a writer. But, it's also kind of a storytelling shorthand, just dress him successfully and you get the point across.
We have to get this movie out on time, for the love of God.
And
we've already had to reshoot half of it because of change of actors.
And the idea that they had to bring in a separate editing crew just to make sure this was done on time is kind of mind-boggling. Like, you take these scenes, I'll take these scenes. It'll be fine. We'll meet in the middle.
We'll exquisite corpse this motherfucker.
The stories of Zemeckis, like, having to, like, take a fucking plane to go, like, work on editing, to then immediately turn around and go back, like, at the end of a day, to then head back to filming that for, the 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. fucking filming schedule they had is bizarre.
Yeah, I think what says everything is Zemeckis will not do commentaries for these movies and has gone on record as saying the reason is he does not have a single memory of a single positive experience he had. This was the horseshoe of his life.
I can understand that, going through and having to fire your lead actor after several weeks of filming because he wasn't funny in your comedy. Oof, that's terrible. Having to cast someone new and then filming around their schedule where you're filming everything until he can show up at like 6 p.m. That's insane. Having to be on the backlot because you don't have enough money. That's insane. There's so many problems this movie ran into where they're just desperately trying to get around it. It really makes lightning in a bottle. They got lucky. Those things all work together when they easily could have broken a less capable film crew. But even if you listen, though, to the interviews with the rest of the cast, like, everyone thought they were going to get fired. Like,
if they can take out Eric Stoltz, how am I safe?
If they can take out Mask.
That's basically it.
Mr. Hollywood over there.
Christopher Lloyd even mentioned that. I was listening to an interview with him. He's like, "Oh, I didn't know if what I was doing was working," and I was nervous for the first couple of days. And Tom Wilson was the same deal. Like, he thought he was being fired when they brought him into the office to let him know that Eric was being let go. Like, he said he walked in there. They called him in, like, "We need to see you." He didn't know Eric was fired. He thought it was his turn. They thought he was going to get kicked off set. Then he found out, hey, we're going to fire this guy. We're going to bring in Michael J. Fox. You're going to refilm your scenes. And he's like, oh, thank God. I'm still getting paid. This is only a second movie, though. So, a ton of these guys were just convinced, oh, they got rid of them. They recast this person partway through. They're changing stuff around. I'm doomed.
Even like one of the members of Biff's gang was the original Biff before they decided he was too short. So, yeah, this was a production where anyone could go at any time.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily seem like a fun environment to be in. That's just like way too much pressure. And they didn't know this was going to work out. At the time, saying you're going to do a time travel comedy where the main hero goes back in time to make out with his mom, hard sell, I'd imagine.
Written by those guys who made Used Cars in 1941.
Yeah, those worked out great. But at least there was Romancing the Stone.
There was Romancing the Stone. Also, cut to George McFly upside down in the future. Hey, who's that? Though that actor does deserve an Oscar for doing a Crispin Glover impression. So, there's that.
Oh, it's more than that. I mean,
we'll get there.
He had Crispin Glover face.
Sounds like a horror movie.
It does. It was.
Glover face.
Is that a disease I want or I don't want?
How do you feel about Rats?
Willard just got released on a special edition Blu-ray, and I'm very happy about it.
What if we surprise people and then we immediately launched into a commentary for Willard?
It turns out this is Crispin Glover month old.
That's it.
I would be so happy.
Can we talk about the Ice Scream Man?
Yes, we can. Anyways, folks, that was a lie. No, we can't. We're actually done with our commentary for tonight. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Box Office Pulp. If you want to listen to more of us, you can find us on iTunes. Go ahead, leave us a review. We love those. We're also on Twitter at Box Office Pulp. We've got a Facebook page. We're on Stitcher. If you want to find us, we're out there. Just type Box Office Pulp into the internet. We'll be around. Anyways, folks, this has been Box Office Pulp. Thanks for listening. Make like a tree. That's a wrap. Get the hell out of here.
You get more out of life when you go out to a movie. Please remember to replace the speaker on the post when you leave the theater.
I'm tempted for us to record an after-credits scene where I come in and say, "Oh, MB, something has to be done about MB."
Is he an asshole? No.
And that's it. Just no. Why are you
No,
being
something just needs
mysterious?
to be-
Just
Something
get
just
in
needs
my
to be
car.
done about him.
Hey, this isn't a time machine at all.
It's a van with time machine drawn on the side with like an SH.
Wait a minute, this is a beanbag, and that's a recording of The Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh god, this is Mandy, isn't it?
He's just playing time.
Am I in a giant bucket filled with Vaseline?
I'll never tell.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.